Thank you, Elena. Obviously, Europe is facing a lot of demographic challenges. Creating legal pathways of migration is one part of the solution, and Greece has been a pioneer in establishing bilateral agreements and creating legal instruments to allow people of high skill or low skill to come and work in the European Union and Greece. But at the same time, I will say with emphasis that irregular migration is not part of the solution. The European asylum system is broken. Obviously, the pact was a good step forward, but it doesn't solve the problem. Currently, what happens is that smugglers drive who comes to the European Union, and that cannot be acceptable. And that also has a political impact. It moves Europe to the far right when moderate political forces cannot persuade European public opinion that we can actually address the challenge. What is the challenge? First of all, we need to redefine who is a refugee. We're working in Europe for the concept of safe countries of transit and safe countries of origin. That's an emphasis that needs to be given. It's part of European legislation. Secondly, we need to be more clear. How do we protect the external border of the European Union? I repeat, it is the smugglers today who decide for a very hefty fee who has the right to come and live in the European Union, because the returns are not working. I'm very pleased that the Commission is now considering a new returns directive. Currently, the level of returns is very low. So what happens in practice? The smuggler selects who comes to Europe. We have a broad definition which gives asylum to people which have gone through safe countries, and they shouldn't be given under the Geneva Convention the right to stay. And those that are not deemed eligible for staying in the European Union cannot be returned because our legislation is too complicated. And that creates a big concern to the European citizens. At the same time, it gives a bad name to legal migration, which is much needed, as it was said before, and I'm sure Achim was said, and I think I'm within my 4 minutes.
Thank you for keeping to time, but also bringing in the very important point of needing a way that reduces costs for development aid.
I think, Elena, first of all, we need to invest more in European families. Greece has created a special ministry for families, giving more incentives to young couples, to support them through having children at the same time, being able to continue their careers and all their life aspirations. So that's very critical. How do you create a natural population growth in the European Union? Demographic has played a role, migration has played the demographic role in Greece more in the 90s, to be fair, that we had a considerable inflow, and we benefit from this considerable inflow of people coming from a region. Since then, we have had more stable, in the end, net impact of migration, the brain drain, countered by some legal migration and irregular migration coming through. Just two final points, if I may. One is that in Europe, we do face a skill shortage, especially in sort of what you call blue-collar work, but this is not necessarily driven by demographics. It's also driven by social preferences, that European families would like to have their kids educated, go to universities, have higher paying jobs, which is perfectly reasonable from every family's point of view. And that creates the shortage of the kind of work we need. And also when you have migrants coming in, it helps for one generation, because then naturally they have the same aspirations, they should have the same aspirations for their children to be educated and move on. Last point I just wanted to mention from the point I was talking about irregular migration. What is oxymoron in the European Union is that we are talking about common rules, we're talking about the pact, we're talking about how do we handle migration flows, but then when somebody is recognized as a refugee, we do not provide for a common European protection space. We have internal borders, we have barriers to the people we have recognized under our own rules to be legally resident in the European Union. Everyone can move around except the refugees. And this is an oxymoron which we waived for the Ukrainians, rightly so, but we haven't waived for the rest of the people coming from all over the world and are recognized under European and international law as refugees. This is an oxymoron in the European policy.
Well, how do you see the geopolitics affecting things?
Sometimes I think we fail to recognize that Europe is an amazing place to live. If you think of the number of people that live in countries that have less of an economic level than the European Union, less of political freedom, they're probably in the billions. And that, rightly so, drives a lot of people to want to come to the European Union. So challenges will always be there. The US factor is very interesting for us, and Johannes was very right to bring it up, because Europe has mostly had arrivals from Africa and Asia. Spain has always had arrivals from Latin America. All that migration flows from Latin America, if they cannot enter the US, you might see an increase of people trying to come to Europe. So we will continue to be under pressure, although traditional wars in the previous years, hopefully in Ukraine and the Middle East, hopefully will have a better year ahead of us.